And thanks, Nisha. We will immediately start off. Today we have Sarmistha, and I will request Shobhana to introduce today's speaker and say a few words about the topic.
Sorry about that. I'm so glad to invite Sarmistha. Sarmistha Mani is a psychotherapist and a certified transactional analyst. She's curious about the human condition and the existence of love and hate in the human experience. A fascinating discovery for her has been the relational realm of therapeutic interactions. A desire to deepen these interests led her to the world of psychoanalysis. Since 2018, she has been attending weekly seminars conducted by Ms. Mallika Verma, clinical psychologist and psychoanalytic psychotherapist. She is currently training with the Indian Psychoanalytic Society, Mumbai chapter. Sorry, I'm just coughing a lot. I'm going to take a sip. Would you want to continue, Abhijit? My throat is so sorry.
It's okay, Shobhana. I will. I think you did introduce Sharmistha. So maybe we straight away go to Sharmistha and hear from her about what she has to share with all of us today. Sharmistha, I think you need someone to also trigger the presentation for you, right? So, yeah. Shobhana,
What I didn't get what you said, Abhijit.
I said you want one of us to manage the. Okay, Nisha is doing that. Okay.
And yeah, Nisha and I spoke about what we could do, and she's made me co-host. So
great. Okay. So over to you two then.
Thank you. So thank you, and wonderful to be with all of you and go back in time to this paper in 2020 when I'd written it. I didn't realize it's been 3 years, and with this opportunity to go back in time and rediscover just how fascinating all that learning and putting it together in this article. It meant a lot to me, and I hope I can, I did get in touch with that experience preparing for this presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the paper, and once I'm done with that, we could talk about any comments or experiences that any of us has connected with, or your own in your therapy or in your life, whatever you resonate with or would like to question. We can do that together. Yeah. So let me share first. Are you able to see the paper?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to begin. Impasse clarification, a relational approach. Abstract. Oh. An impasse is described as the point where two or more opposing forces meet, Goulding's, with the assimilation of a relational approach into transactional analysis. Impasse in the relationship between the therapist and client has become a rich source for exploring and transforming the interpersonal and interpsychic processes of the client. I share my understanding of working with relational impasse. A brief look at how I got there. In describing their work, the Gouldings showed us how the interpsychic resolution of an impasse leads to redecision in the child ego state. Meller suggested that impasse clarification would unmake the self-limiting decisions made earlier in life. When I began my practice of transactional analysis psychotherapy, my emphasis was on the intrapsychic resolution of the client's internal conflict. However, in the course of working with some clients, I encountered challenges that left me feeling inadequate and doubting my capacity to be effective. In the course of training, I became aware that some of these challenges may be because of relational impasses between the client and me. I grew to recognize that my distress was a valuable source of information about my client's internal world and how our therapeutic relationship interacted with it, even as it revealed unintegrated aspects of my own experience. The application of a relational lens to therapeutic engagement is backed by research on attachment, early infant studies, and neuroscience. These findings highlighted the impact of consistently attuned relationships on the development of an infant and the consequences of a lack of them from repeated misattunement or non-attunement. From this emerged a recognition that the therapeutic relationship too could be a source of recreating early relational dynamics and therefore a medium to explore and integrate what was unresolved for the client, Stutzrich. Further below, I illustrate how working with the therapeutic relationship impacted the client's journey towards integration. As transactional analysis assimilated subsequent approaches that invoked the relational realm of therapeutic interaction, an emphasis on the exploration of the unconscious developed. To Connell and Landais, the very nature of close contact between any two or more human beings is bound to affect us at levels that operate outside of consciousness and that inform our most fundamental patterns of relating. My experience of such relating with the client helps me understand Little's statement that the therapist's presence mobilizes and activates the dependent self with all its longing and fears. I am reminded of a client who kept saying that there was something he was longing for in spite of our repeated explorations into his intrapsychic processes to understand what that might be. As the therapeutic relationship developed over several months, I came to understand through our experience of transformative transference and countertransference that we had recreated a dynamic of omnipotence and hope for wish fulfillment, Hagarden and Sills. I realized that I had become a receptacle for the hope he had projected into me that I would transform his life for him as he waited for the time I would take all of his problems away. Following subsequent discussions on the possibilities and limitations we as human beings navigated, the client's capacity for self-agency began to develop steadily. This experience, among others, was a stimulus to study the relational realms of interaction and engagement of the unconscious. Relational impasse, an interpersonal route to intrapsychic resolution. In continuation of sharing my understanding, from an initial engagement with the external world of the client, as a transference relationship develops, the focus shifts towards the interaction within the therapeutic dyad. Following this development could be experiences in which a breakdown in the therapeutic process occurs, Connell and Landais. This is what I believe Little calls the impasse between the repeated relationship and the needed relationship. I understand the repeated relationship as the one that perpetuates the dysfunctional processes of relating from the past and the needed relationship as the one that facilitates the process of integration in the present. I demonstrate my understanding of working towards impulse clarification in the interpersonal context. Now, Sheila, you, my therapist, will disregard my dignity. When we began our sessions, Sheila was doubtful if she could ever be helped. Interacting with her, I sensed a lot of anxiety, helplessness, and confusion behind a tough demeanor. From her history, I learned that Sheila's mother would dismiss any of Sheila's needs that didn't match her idea of what Sheila needed and ridiculed her as being incapable of making correct choices. If Sheila were to ever insist, her mother would condemn her for her ingratitude, accusing her of being undeserving. Her father would occasionally protest against this treatment, but would go quiet when he was put in place by her mother. When the client's world diffuses into the therapeutic setting, in our sessions, she would consistently maintain that moving to another city and starting life afresh without her parents was her only hope to find freedom. When I asked her what this freedom meant to her, she described it as a place where no one had any demands on her, in effect, a place without any other. In this phase, my focus remained on supporting her to experience the needed relationship in which she felt safe and valued, to relax and connect to me. I responded to her felt meaning, her garden self, provided consistent empathic listening, and offered extra sessions when her anxiety increased. After her initial resistance, as she became involved in the process of discovering herself, she felt more engaged in therapy. The therapist seeks to join the client's world. In exploring her world with her, I became aware that I experienced considerable anxiety. I constantly felt she could slip away from me anytime. I sensed that she held me at a distance. She would let me know that she saw herself as self-sufficient and that she was doing her own work in therapy. I wondered if she would ever experience trust and closeness towards me. The conflict will slowly emerge in the transference, and if the therapist works within the transference rather than with the transference, then the conflict will gradually become manifest in the therapeutic dyad. When this occurs, the conflict between the repeated relationship and the needed relationship can be addressed, and the two aspects integrated. You matter as long as we agree, I know what's best for you. Over time, recreating a dynamic from the past, I seemed to focus on keeping Sheila motivated to remain in therapy. And I became like mother, who was doing everything in Sheila's best interest. I believed if Sheila changed the concreteness in her thinking to become more flexible, she would be happy. My idea for Sheila seemed more important to me than her experiences of the world and of me. I carried a latent feeling of exasperation that there was always a reason why she couldn't be happy. I was also put off by her stubbornness to establish what I saw as a rigid boundary between us. I began to grow indifferent to her distress, just like her mother preserved her needs over Sheila's. The enactment in the repeated relationship was playing out, and I was not yet fully conscious of it. Stuttridge and Sills. You matter as you are. Let's get to know you together. As the needed relationship developed alongside, I started to value her need to get away from everyone, no longer questioning it, but echoing her steadfastness, her garden and Sills. I began to get a sense of who she was over and above her painful relationship dynamics. In the process, I encountered a precocious girl who knew very early she did not like her mother's dismissal of her and others. She learned quickly not to be like her mother and coped by detaching herself. I began to share my appreciation of her, stroking her for her resilience and sense of fairness. She started sharing with me her relationship with her brother's children and would engage in exploring my ideas of her experiences. I sensed a tension between her need to protect herself from me and her developing capacity to relax in my presence. Towards integration. Little describes the therapeutically required relationship as one that supports the therapist's investment in both the needed and the repeated relationships, so both could be tolerated for integration. I found my anxiety began to reduce as our interactions deepened. I was also baffled, sometimes turned off, by her inability to be happy. The following happened in a session which helped me experience what her unconscious communication to me about her distress was. Novellino. Sheila shared with some desperation that she really believed she should go away. I sensed an immense longing in her voice for a safe world. She said she didn't know what was stopping her, even though that was the only way she would be happy. The use of interpretations with the repeated relationship offers a new interpersonal experience, writes Little, citing Stern. I mentioned to her that I got a sense of her anticipation for something to happen to become happy, reflecting on how her experience of being far from happiness reminded me of my experience of being far from her. I wondered aloud about the consequences if she showed me she was happy. Sheila blurted out that she was afraid I would take away her dignity if she did. And with that, she started sobbing, recounting the dread that accompanied her in every interpersonal experience. I was deeply moved listening to her as she sat crying before me, aware that what we just shared had impacted both of us. For when the client's child speaks to the therapist and the client can forge the links between language and the unconscious. Hargarten and Sills. A relational breakthrough. Sheila and I had recreated a repeated experience of her relationships in which she believed that I had the power to take her dignity away from her. I too had participated in perpetuating her dread by looking away too from her ways of protecting herself from me and overlooking what she lost in the process of saving her dignity. Yet, I had also wondered about the internal world of this person whose distance from me I allowed to impact me, thereby providing a significant relational need that was missed in Sheila's experience. Erskine, Mawsond, and Troutman. Working within the transference countertransference dyad, I reflected on what it meant for Sheila to be in my presence how I had used or misused my power over her, how she had adapted to having to put up with me, etc. Our ongoing engagement with the interpersonal relationship has influenced her intrapsychic experience of herself in the relationship, as well as mine. Sheila and I have continued to develop this therapeutic relationship, and today, a year after the above exchange, Sheila acknowledges my presence in her journey. Recently, we were exploring how being stuck at home with her mother during the lockdown was for her. After sharing about her stressful situation, she expressed her relief that she had the consistent therapeutic space to come back to every week, even if we could only manage it online currently. She also wanted to know when we would meet in person again. As we journey on, we will encounter further opportunities for recycling impasse clarification, working through which the process of separation from her therapist, me, would strengthen. Conclusion: I find the relational way of working through an impasse immensely satisfying. I find it deepens the quality of relating between the therapist and client, thus providing opportunities for the emergence and integration of further hidden aspects of the unconscious as they impact and are impacted by various facets of our relating. Is everybody familiar with transaction analysis? Maybe I should have checked that out in the beginning.
Do you want them to raise hands or something through the reactions to give a sense of how many? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Or I think whoever is ready can talk and we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sharmista, as I listened while you were reading, and I was also connecting with my work with clients,
Mhm.
quite a few places. I'll start with one, and then maybe we can build upon it. Uh, the sense that I got was in the relational work that you did with this person. Initial period was wherein you are allowing yourself to be part of the transferential relationship that client had brought to the therapeutic relationship, right? And you played along rather than trying to be just a distant observer of that relationship. um, Question that's sitting in my mind is that while you are trying to understand this relationship that client is expecting unconsciously,
Mm.
and you are also playing into that relationship, uh, what is the space then for your observations or even interpretations?
Mhm.
Was there space, or
Mm.
did you just allowed yourself to just be there,
Mm.
and allow it to be more vivid
Mm.
before you started
Mm.
yeah reflecting on the observations or something? I'm
Mm.
curious more about that right now.
Mm. Yeah, that's an important question. So, in a way, transference anyway happens, whether we notice or not, or work with it or not. So, that while that was unfolding, Initially, yes, like Hagarden and Sill say in their book Transactional Analysis, a Relational Perspective, that the therapist could stay with the felt meaning. The client may have, carry something deeper, while their awareness may be of a different aspect, but the therapist could stay with what they want the therapist to know. So in a way, that was what I was doing. If she wanted me to know that she was angry, I would stay with that rather than look at it or interpret the sadness that the anger covered, for example. I don't know if that gave you, yeah,
So
sure.
you contained that for her. Would that be right word if I'm using?
Acknowledged it, yes.
Yeah.
Contained, yes. Acknowledged, and gave her a space to feel a validation of her experience.
Yeah.
For a patient, for a client, it's so confusing. They've tried a lot to help themselves, and a lot of times they reach out to us when they feel things are breaking down, and in a way to experience that another gets the sense that they have made.
Yeah. Yeah. And very different response that you offered than her other relationships,
Absolutely.
which allowed possibly her to ease into that space, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's important to acknowledge.
Yeah. 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 So it's less of interpretations or bringing observations or less of techniques then, and it's more of, as I hear as you being open to whatever is coming your way and staying with that. Your being then is really valuable as a therapist in that, and creating that deeper relaxed relationship for the client then to feel more allowing client to be becoming so self-reflective much more than therapist trying to do something about it. Would that be a fair understanding?
In a way, you could say that. So when we look at, for example, empathic transactions, where the therapist brings in an empathic understanding of the client's experience, empathy is also, I mean, it does cover the, feelings of compassion and kindness and, the so-called positive feelings. But empathy is also about confronting what is true for the client. So if there is anger towards the therapist, then the therapist could talk about it. That is also an empathic way of relating to the client. An important factor would be that we gauge when the patient or the client is ready to hear, more robust interpretations and confrontation.
Yeah. So as I hear, even the skill lies in there, gauging it. Yeah.
I see Bhakti has raised her hand, and also there's a question that's come in from Sanjida. Shall we go to, a couple of them? So we'll go one after the other.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I think it was a very, when I was reading through the description, it's very, if I was actually in the place of the therapist, the experience could have been quite overwhelming for myself to be able to completely empathize and, as you said, be with the emotion rather than quickly interpret and try to resolve it. I think it would have been quite a challenging role to play. And I was thinking in my mind that so if I have understood it correctly, when the transference and the countertransference is developing naturally because of the way subconscious works in an interaction, the repeated relationship is manifesting, maybe. And then when you're trying to evoke the needed relationship somewhere in between, I wonder when or how the tilt happens. It's difficult to understand. And ma'am, I know that we are speaking in the context of a therapist and a client, but for someone, if I think empathy is a skill that spills onto all areas of life. So, we do observe similar repeated relationships manifesting in our personal lives as well. And so that's why the overwhelming experience, because even we have our own sense of transference. And yeah, so it's just I'm thinking aloud here as to how much of a difference it makes to our lives as a whole, and in context of the therapeutic interaction, how and when the journey happens from the one to the other end of the needed relationship.
Mm, 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 mm. That's an important point you're making, Bhakti, about how, the therapist we are at its foundation is the human being we are. So what we experience in every relationship, we will bring into a therapeutic relationship. So
Right.
in a way, that's what makes it interesting in a relational way of working, because it's the therapist's self which is the vehicle for change. How am I willing to sit with my uncertainties? How am I willing to challenge what I don't know and yet be with this person? Because as the relationship develops, in both of us, the patient and the client and the therapist, past deficits, past needs, we will carry into this relationship as well. And so how does the therapist then, manage both theirs and the patient's needs and resistances and what is the word, all the frustrations and all of that.
Okay. So, ma'am, you're saying the process is therapeutic for the therapist as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Sort of, because we are having to improvise on our natural instincts to address problems a certain way.
Absolutely. So yes, the therapist's imagination is a big ally.
Okay. So then there is no one point of change. It's like a constant process of,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
You
Okay.
could say that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your question and observation.
I think Vicky can go next with your question.
Yeah, good evening. And this is the first time I am attending this program. I'm from Mumbai, and I was introduced to this program by Surya from Coimbatore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm unable to keep my camera open because of the bandwidth issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have a couple of points which I thought I should, just make. So firstly, I want to compliment Sarmistha for this excellent disquisition. And I think it brought about so many things. And from an experience standpoint, what I have always believed in is, and I think, the most important thing is that I can only give others what I have with me. I cannot pour from an empty cup. So all my work, I mean, I wear different hats, but essentially it is boiled down to bringing about bolstering my sense of agency, right? And making me an integrated, in Gestaltian terms, an integrated individual who operates from a space of autonomy, which Byrne speaks about, and a self-regulated, emotionally self-regulated person, right? And that is in a sense what I try to do, because behaviors are resultant of the feelings, and feelings come from the neurobiochemistry, the state, the emotions, and behind that sits the whole lot of things that we spoke about right now, right? And most of the things that is happening, there is a content in that. So behavior, there is a content, beliefs, there's a content, values, there is a content, but what you have at the deepest level is content free, right? So this part, what I'm getting about the impasse, there are two parts to this. What I'm getting at is, one is the intrapsychic impasse of the individual, because there are conflicting, parts to it. And the whole idea is to bring about the awareness deep from the unconscious, what Jung spoke about, and then try to bring about, a resolution which results into internal congruence, which reflects in the congruence within and without. And second is the impasse between the therapist and the relational part that you just now spoke about. So what I'm interested to know in this case is, one, when you, Sharmishta, experienced certain emotions, because I believe when I'm as I mean, I don't want to use any term, but as somebody who holds the space for the other person, my term of reference is what I'm feeling. And that's an area of work for me, right? What is really happening out there? So one is in case of Sheila, there was this history about her relationship with her mother and how those things developed the programs inside her, right? The child, the part of it. And so how did that impasse within her, what were the conflicting parts that eventually got resolved? And secondly, as far as you're concerned as a therapist, what did you experience within you and how did you bring about a resolution? So end of it is the resolution from the client side. But of course, this is within the framework of the transference and counter transference that you spoke about. So this is the last two things I wanted to understand.
Thank you, Vicky. That's a very interesting question. In a way, while I have talked about interpsychic and interpersonal, I'm also wondering, human beings being relational, maybe one doesn't exist, independent of the other, that each needs the other to feed itself. About Sheila and I, even today, we are, like I'd mentioned in the paper, we are recycling the impasse. Now with the, lockdown behind us, and I've opened my clinics to patients, to, the ones in Chennai, to meet me in person. And now Sheila won't come. Why? Because I have told her when she feels the need to, she will come. So in a way, you can see that, that fear of the other, the need to hold on to a very rigid sense of independence is emerging again. But what's important is, once again, we have an opportunity to look at what she is going through, what I am going through. Because again, this time, last time I felt more, either indifferent or what is the word? Helpless. Those were my experiences. But this time, I'm more angry. And in a way, I like noticing that, because it means I feel Sheila is more capable of confrontation. So we have been talking about who am I to her? What do I become? This is her need to control relationships. And we've been talking about these things. So it's still, so in a way, resolution happens, I would say, again, without noticing that it happens. I don't know if that answered your question, or if you were looking for something more.
Not at all. Not at all. These things are highly evolving in nature. And I thank you for your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deepika, would you like to go next? We also have a question from Sanjita. I'll read it out.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. I really loved this discussion. What I noticed about Sheila is her mom initially, I mean, one of the headings was, as long as you agree that I know what is best for you, then we are okay. And somewhere you were also having your own ideas of how she could get better. And it was only when you let that go and let's both discover who you are and let me get rid of my notions on what is going to make you feel better. And you felt that as a point where, I mean, I wanted to ask, the question is that what you mean is the distinction between working within the transference and working with the transference? Because at one point I'm still confused about the distinction, and I'm wondering if this is what the difference between I know what is best for you and moving on to you tell me what you want. Is that what you mean? I mean, I'm a bit confused.
In a way, you're talking about how both are a part of transference. So that's an important point you're making. By working within transference, what I mean is where the therapist recognize or at least considers that whatever is happening in the client's world outside is also something that the client recreates with the therapist. So that is what we look at. That is what we learn from. Working with transference is more about there is a problem. How do we understand the problem? How do we resolve it? That is my understanding of, if I would have to make a distinction. This is how I'm thinking.
All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Deepika.
Sanjita, do you want to ask your question directly, since or you want us to read it out?
Sanjita there?
Yeah. I think you can read it out. And I have another question just now.
Ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So the previous question and one last question, that how a therapist can recreate with the help of transference. So these three questions.
Does it follow your previous question?
Yes, ma'am.
The question you just asked, then Shobana?
Yeah. So her question is, what is the basic difference between, what is the basic difference of repeated relationship and the needed relationship?
Right.
Do they impact all three levels of impasse in the client?
Right. So to understand, let's start with the repeated relationship. What that refers to is, those deficits in the client, those developmental, misattunements, and what happened to the person because of that, those needs that the person looks for in every relationship that they create, so that something can be resolved. So that I would understand as the repeated, what we repeat because we're searching for something. And the needed is what might provide, what might facilitate meeting those needs, so that there is a more, more capable person, capable of regulating themselves, capable of meeting their needs in the world rather than searching for it. Is that something that, yeah, yes, Sanjita.
So the repeated relationship is connected with the rackety behavior of the therapist or the client?
Here the focus is on the client. So we are looking at the client, but of course it's a relationship. So both of us are in it. I am also in a way perpetuating what she couldn't find elsewhere. So that is the realm of what got missed. So yes, the repeated relationship is where the therapist in a way couldn't provide what the patient was looking for. And an integration with the needed relationship where the therapist makes an active, attempt at staying with what got missed. And so that in integration of the two, the client meets their needs. Thank you. That was an important question. one paper that I found very stimulating, that I based on my paper is Ray Little's 2011 paper of impasse clarification. I think that's what he's called it too, or within the transference countertransference matrix, he calls it.
Yeah. I have one question, Sarmistha. This is a relational work. It's a long-term in nature. And as you play into the transferential relationship, even the escape hatches could get triggered for the client in terms of leaving the therapy or picking up a fight and playing out the defenses that client has learned.
Absolutely.
Right. So how would you handle those situations? How would you is just bringing it to the notice is the way forward? Because it's okay. Let me put my fear out that making it extremely conscious might also, or bringing it out might also be seen as an attack. Something which was so unconscious for the person might suddenly, when the person sees that as a defense mechanism that someone is using, could be seen as shameful aspect, or could be seen as also something which is valuable inside me has suddenly come out, right?
Absolutely, something that I'm so terrified about.
Yeah,
and that is pointed.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So when I'm wondering, how do you then manage those delicate situations, and how do you manage client when probably they are in a fragile state?
So in a way, so there are, of course, I mean, many ways to look at it. I'm reminded of a recent experience where she spoke about how she had gotten to a fight with her brother. He just couldn't understand her. And so something like, I'm never going to talk to him. And so in a way, making connections, here I am repeatedly talking about you coming to the sessions in person. Then is this how you experience me? And is this how you're going to leave me? So that is working within the transference. So we do bring it out, but we provide a context.
Yeah. So as I hear you, you're exploring the current relationship between you and client in the context of the other relationships, and that rather than wait for something to explode in this relationship, it's safer when you're talking about some other relationship, but trying to build a bridge to the current relationship. And then I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's very valuable in the longer term work, as I see it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I was sitting with one thought when you were answering Bhakti's question, that when we are in a relationship and building the relationship with the client, we are also in a way healing ourselves, as we also bring in our own unfinished business to that relationship. I want to know your thoughts on then the personal work that a therapist needs to do to work in a relational realm. As I see that therapist also needs to be far more aware of what is his own material and what is the material being then, put in by the client into him or her.
That's a very important aspect of working relationally, because only my capacity to relate to another person is dependent on my capacity to relate to myself. How much am I comfortable with my difficult feelings? And whatever the client brings up, how am I taking it? If I'm comfortable with it, it may not be comfortable in the sense that I like it, but for me to tolerate it. So what I can tolerate in myself is what I can tolerate in another. So personal work becomes consistent. Personal work is very important.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm asking many questions.
Please, these are very important questions. Thank
Yeah.
you.
One more question that I'm sitting with, as you work relationally. How do you, at the same time, transactional analysis also talks about working contractually all the time, right? Now, this, so the expectation is that, oh, contract should be clear, contract should be explicit, blah, blah, blah. But then relational stuff is so unconscious. How do you marry the two?
Yes, yes. So contract one aspect of contracts is outcomes. A contract is also about how many times we meet, what is the fees, and in a way to explain the work as we work with what you cannot understand by yourself. It's only when you talk that I can help you to think about what you can't see. So something like that is also a part of contracting. So the content of the contract might change. There is still contracting. We don't have a clearly defined goal that way, a describable in terms of change.
Yeah. So in that sense, how does one feel the need to maybe terminate now the relationship? Or you said that, you have informed client that you don't need to see her, but whenever she needs to, she can get in touch with you. How do you develop that sense, or when do you do that, especially when the contract is more about understanding what's the person's inner world is, because there is no end to that discovery or exploration, right? Ever. Yeah. So how do you go about it?
I would say that is one area of the client's agency, where the client decides how long they want to go, when they want to take a break. We talk about it, how are they thinking about it, and what do they understand by this need? So that might happen, but the client decides. And I haven't worked with anybody to that place where I can say, okay, we're good. I haven't come that far with anybody.
Sure. So
sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, Shobana. I was just going to possibly summarize, but I don't need to take your time. Please.
Sure. So, as I'm reading your paper, I see a sense of ease that you have shown in writing the paper about the relationship. My sense of even having worked with clients where the transference has been intense, I know that how Hagedorn and Sills talk about, wearing a metaphoric seatbelt and bracing yourself for what is going to come. And that kind of an experience can go on for a year, which has happened in my case, where, knowing that there is going to be anger and you having to hold that space. What would, what would be how was it for you? Maybe that's one question. How did
what
you
was
handle?
that? Sorry, I missed what you said. What would be?
How do you handle something that is so intense, prolonged, where you will not take the decision for the client to terminate, and yet it's important to work within the transference. Your thoughts on that, Sarmistha?
In some ways, we learn to be detached to some extent. That is a learning and supervision and our own personal analysis. provide us with that support to develop that capacity. It is uncomfortable. It is, what is the word? We do, have quite difficult thoughts. We wish they would terminate. All these are vital clues. All these are countertransference clues to understand what the client may be experiencing elsewhere.
Yeah, I hear you. Detachment, learning to detach through our work. So it's a spiritual journey for us also in the process of embarking or in this process with our clients. Yeah.
So Sharmistha, do you work also short term on specific things, or you're chosen to work only relationally or long term, and then you?
I am now training in psychoanalysis, so that is the path I've taken. So
Yeah.
it will be long term.
Yeah, because I was wondering short term would be a very different approach.
Though Hargarten, why don't you finish?
No, my question indeed was, probably sometime in past you would have worked short term and then you probably moved relational. I'm just making a guess over here. And how has been this shift for you if you did that shift?
That's an important question. When I started out, surprisingly, I think from the beginning, there was how do I put it? So there was never, okay, let's work at, making this change happen. So from the beginning, it was, let's uncover. So from initially, it was, you tell me and I'll tell you what to do, to moving into, okay, how can we look at us? But yes, as a counselor, I think very early, it was about, okay, you want to do this, let's look at the steps. So I have been through that as well, actually.
So your journey from much more active counselor or a therapist to a much more receiving or containing therapist, how has that shift been for you? You face challenges in that change in the perspective, or it happened over a period of time for you?
It's a 10-year, slow transformation. So there was confusion, there was anxiety. There were difficult aspects to that gradual development.
Yeah. I was curious because many times I have experienced clients expecting that therapist will do something for me or will, and sitting with that tension that I'm not going to do anything that will just vanish your problem.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And still being okay with not doing that.
Depending on the comfort, by comfort, I mean how much I feel this client is ready to hear. Sometimes with some clients, I've also been able to say, you're hoping for something magical to happen. You see me as a magician. So like you said, a whole range of, sometimes it's like, oh my God, this is not going anywhere, to that panic, to being able to confront.
Yeah.
I see Deepika's hand is raised. Deepika, you want to go ahead with your question?
So I just wanted to ask, since you just mentioned that you're training in psychoanalysis, like you mentioned Ray Little's paper as something that you loved, anything else about, psychoanalytic works that as a beginner I can start with, because I'm actually just in my second year of master's in psychology. So and I I mean, I think sometime last year I, started loving the psychoanalytic approach to therapy, unconscious transference. And when I started reading about it, I was, for some reason, I thought this is the real deal sort of a feeling. So any, recommendations for an absolute beginner, what to read? You know, this is a more general question, but I just wanted to ask. Yeah.
So in the TA world, would I be able to recommend psychoanalytic thinking? Is that your question?
Both. I mean, even if it's not TA, I'm okay with it as long. I mean, what do you think? What would TA is also something that I'm.
So are you
both.
Are you a trainee in TA?
No, actually, I
right.
just
so you don't
sort
have.
of.
Okay.
I wanted to join, but I just saw the Instagram post and I signed up for this discussion. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So that's what I wanted to know, if you had a background or not. With psychoanalysis, I mean, there's writing everywhere, but you could read Klein, you could read Freud.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact,
all right.
Byrne, all of them have been psychoanalysts.
Yeah.
So any of their, work,
okay.
The REBT founder, all of them have been psychoanalysts.
Right. Okay. Okay. Just one, I hope it's not an annoying question, but with Freud, where do I start? Like,
yeah, it's a discovery. I suppose anywhere you start, you can go forward or back.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think the space is really, it feels inclusive, and I think it also takes a lot to talk about our own journey as therapists and what we've learned. So what got me interested was also like to actually go back and revisit stuff that somehow we could have done better as therapists in the past. And I think that definitely takes detachment and compassion for self. It's not necessarily like a big question, but in terms of practice, how can we build upon building presence and that detachment while still holding space? Because holding space really takes a lot of energy, and there's this transference happening, right? So sometimes, and it's not always pleasant. It's so how do we then cleanse and ground before, after therapy? Because there's the mind we can train, and we can like ask those questions for reevaluating and self-supervision. But like how could we then how could we practice building presence? How do you do that?
Very short answer would be by allowing my analyst and my supervisor to help me find that presence. It's what I learn that I can work with, what I have inside me that I can work with. So what I have received, I can then create, offer.
Thank you, ma'am.
Vicky, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Just wanted to share something experiential, which is very contextual to what Sarmistha and Arvind were discussing. So this came to me as a result of, my meditative practices. It's not easy, but there is a term I want to use. I would call it dispassionate compassion, if there were to be one such term. But the most important thing which helped me was to firstly cognitively grasp that a person is not his behavior. This helped me. And when that really seeped into my being, and I said, this is what I am at my being level, I realized that, look, the guy who is sitting in front of me, or the person who's sitting in front of me, is there because dash, 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 dash. So my reaction or my response was a classical countertransference. So that was the area of work for me. So, Arvind, what I did was, after every session, and I, in fact, I wear various hats. I heard, Sarmistha speak about Dr. Albert Ellis' REBT. So that apart, classical coaching and, NLP and Gestalt, I mean, various. But end of the day, everything is it's all working on the machinations of the human mind, right? So, so the point is, my grounding technique has been to just disconnect, and then, I don't know, this goes beyond comprehension, but it happens. It comes with practice, and you're ready for the next, shall we say, onslaught. Pardon the expression. Thank you.
So practicing this sort of sense of segregation of the person from the behavior.
Yeah, that's one of the main presuppositions in NLP, that a person is not his behavior.
Yes.
So in my corporate dealings, I mean, I do a lot of work in the corporate sector. The conflicts arise because you really take a stand. You are right, or I am right and you are wrong. It's not about who is right or who is wrong. It's about what is right and what is wrong in this context. So you can immediately de-link a person. And if you are willing to accept that person where he or she is, as much as that person can accept you. So, I have realized this, that a lot of these issues arise. What position are you taking? What life position are you taking in that conversation? Because if you're going to take any position other than I plus you plus, there is going to be a problem. So I have very consciously allowed, because these things go beyond the mind. See, you wake up at 3:30 in the morning and you meditate, and you reach a state where, it's absolute dissolution. You can't put it, it's beyond human comprehension. And that's why it has taken me, I think, Sarmistha spoke, it took 10 years. For me, it has taken 30 years probably. And I'm still at the beginning of the foothills. So that's my take on this. And please don't mistake this for humility either. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions or comments or any reflections?
Sarmistha, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Yeah.
From whatever, or something that you want to state?
Questions really, but I have found the questions and the impressions and comments that were shared very stimulating.
Okay.
Okay, then I guess we are good to come towards the end of this session. But before we end, couple of things. One, I wish to remind all of you that SATA has upcoming conference on 23rd and 24th of September in Bangalore. And I guess all of you would have received invitation for that. Welcome to Hegidara is the title. It's all about dialogues on the mental health, and it's going to be quite exciting 2 days, quite eventful 2 days. So we hope that many of you would be there, and we will get also to meet you in person. So please do check out your emails if you have not yet, and please do come to Bangalore. Secondly, before we go, If you can put your videos on for a minute so that I could take a snap and yeah, and put your lovely smile on your face, so that please wear it so that you look at your best. Okay, just give me one more sec. I'll try one more time. Yep, that's it. Thank you very, very much, everyone, each one of you. See you again next month in one more such interesting session. Thank you very much, Sarmistha, for making it convenient for you to share your thoughts. It's lovely. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.